Hi there, I'm Dr. Naidanova, and I wanted to give you an overview of Chapter 2, which is all about assessment because a lot of times students tend to be really, really challenged by this chapter. It has a lot of terms you guys haven't heard about before. So I wanted to kind of give you an idea of what you should be focusing on when you read the chapter. So basically, what I'm going to do now is share my Chapter 2 PowerPoint. It will be different from the one I have provided on Blackboard. The one I'm going to show you is the one I usually use with my face-to-face students. So it has less information on it, but I'm going to go more in depth. I thought that would be a good idea so you guys can have like the two ways you can study and more information about the chapter. So here it is, Chapter 2. And like I already mentioned, hopefully you guys can see this. It is all about how psychology is studied and assessed. And again, that can be a lot of fun. It can be very, very challenging as well. Usually, how I start this chapter with my face-to-face students is I give them a test to take themselves. And it's a very simple test. It's only 5 questions, and it's a Likert type test, which means that the questions range from one, you strongly disagree with the statement, two, you kind of disagree. If you're neutral, you put a four. If you agree, you give yourself a six. If you really agree with the statement, then that's a seven. So here are all the 5 statements that make up that test. The first one is, in most ways, my life is close to my ideal. So again, go ahead and do that test for yourselves. Again, if you strongly disagree on one, if you strongly agree 7, and anywhere in between. The second one is, the conditions of my life are excellent. Third one, I am satisfied with my life. Uh, the fourth one is, so far I have gotten the important things I want in life. And the fifth statement that you guys have to kind of test yourself on is, if I could live my life over, I would change almost nothing. So at this point, I let my students kind of total their scores, add them together, and get a total score. Okay. So I'll give you guys a second to do that as well. Again, add all your points together and make sure that you have a total score. Okay. And while you're doing that, I will give you some kind of normative statistics to give you an idea where you stand. For example, in psychology, we say that if you have obviously mostly strongly agrees and agrees, that means you score really, really high on that test. And by now, you guys probably guessed that that is a happiness test, right? It's actually called the satisfaction with life test. And it's one of the most frequently used tests in positive psychology to kind of test how happy you are, how much you like your life. So again, if you have above 18, you are considered to be generally happy. Another way to think about it is you have mostly agrees and strongly agrees. Some of the normative statistics are, for example, American college students on average scored 23.7 on this test. So then we talk about it in my class. Is this high? Is this low? How does it compare to how you scored? The lowest group in terms of scores in America tends to be prison inmates. They only score on average 12.3 on this. And most people think, like, obviously, they will not be a very happy group. But actually, the main reason why prison inmates score so low on this test is because the lack of choice, the restriction of freedom, has a direct impact on our happiness. What I'm trying to say is that even if we're not in prison, if we are unable to make choices for ourselves, if we live in a regimented environment, somebody tells us when to wake up, when to eat, when to do our activities, we will be pretty unhappy too. That is a recipe for depression, anxiety, and generally general unhappiness with human beings. Another very interesting statistic is with American adults. In general, men score higher than women, which is kind of something we also discuss in class. Why are men happier, or at least reportedly happier than women? And in general, adults score higher than college students. So again, we talk about what some of those reasons might be. And if you guys have any ideas, I would love to hear your answers. I would love an email from you as well. In general, when it comes to happiness, though, using that scale, we also talk about how the US in general compares to other countries. And you guys probably guessed it, and you've heard that on the news over and over and over again. That the US is unfortunately not number one when it comes to happiness. That usually goes to the Scandinavian countries. So it's Finland, Norway, Denmark. One of them is usually number one in the world when it comes to happiness. Um, Canada is an interesting kind of outlier because they used to be like lower on happiness as a country, but they've been moving up steadily. And recently they've been at number three. The United States was number six when I started teaching this class. 12 years ago, I guess. But now, unfortunately, we moved to number 14. I think the latest one we were at number 16 or something like that. So, unfortunately, just in the past decade, Americans have reported less and less happiness and kind of satisfaction with their lives. China is number 12. I usually get asked that. That's why I put it on here. Russia is number 28. The important thing to remember is no, we are not the happiest country in the world. But when you think about it, there are 800 and something other countries that have lower happiness than us. So it's kind of like good news, bad news situation. So that's some of the background of how we apply that test. Now, going back to our chapter and how we assess exam tests and how we kind of talk about assessment in personality, I will provide a little more information to that. First of all, it's really important how you frame your question. And research always begins with framing question. For example, the person that created that test wanted to know, how can we know if somebody's happy or unhappy? And the only way to answer that question is to create a happiness test. So framing is really important. If you are a lawyer, you already knew that, because basically really, really matters how you frame your questions when somebody's on the stand, because you can make them look really, really innocent or really, really guilty for the same action. And in general, like I already mentioned, this chapter is focused on measurement, which has a very, very lengthy definition. It's a process by which an assessment is used to acquire and express information about an object, person, or event. And again, that's all in the book, that's all in the notes. I mostly will be focusing on other important information besides definitions here. What you really, really need to know for this chapter is the concept of reliability and validity. And the easiest way to think about reliability is basically to think about consistency. So, as I already mentioned, a test is reliable if it is consistent. So how would I know if my bathroom scale is reliable? It will be if I get on it on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and I always get the same number, right? I always weigh the same pounds. If my bathroom scale is super unreliable, then it will give me I don't know, 150 on Monday, 200 on Wednesday, and 90 on Friday. So clearly there's no consistency there. The second concept of how we know if a test is good is validity. And that basically is looking at whether the test measures what it's supposed to measure. Reliability is more important than validity, because if you don't have reliability, you don't have a test. But if you don't have validity, you don't know what the test is actually measuring. So let's think about all those Facebook quizzes that you guys have seen and other social media. I don't know what um, character you are, what Marvel superhero you are, whatever it is. Obviously, they have very low reliability because they haven't been tested enough. And they clearly have very low validity because you're probably not really the superhero that the test told you are. So another way to think about validity is, let's say you took a test that you thought measures intelligence. and you score really, really low. Well, if it has low validity, those results don't mean anything. It might have been scoring how well you follow the news or know popular culture, which is not intelligence. So again, we as psychologists have to be really intentional when we create a test, to make sure it has high validity and it really measures what it's supposed to measure. So like this is reliability, like I already mentioned, the definition is the consistency of scores. They're expected to be the same. And the different types of reliability that we talk about in your book are first of all test retest. So you give a population a test, then you give them the same test a few months later, and make sure there's a high correlation or high association between the two scores. So if they got like a really high score in intelligence in May, you would expect them to get a really high score in intelligence in December of the same year, and that means that the scale is high reliable. The test you created is high reliable. Again, there's another way you can assess reliability. It's called split half reliability. There are different ways. Please read from the book and the other PowerPoint how you can assess reliability, because they're very, very important. And again, nothing gets created in psychology unless it goes through like extensive reliability testing. Um, like I already mentioned, validity is something else you guys have to be aware of. And that is the degree to which the test actually measures what it's supposed to measure. And again, in our book, they talk about many different types of validity that you guys have to be familiar with, because again, we don't just do one test and assume our test has high validity. We measure it many, many different ways. Okay, so this was the first part of the chapter that you guys need to know.